Welcome to Game and Going Deeper, a podcast series by the Game and Brotherhood where we talk about everything personal development, mental health, and sexuality. I am your host, Matt Landsiedel. I am an intuitive life and spiritual coach and empathic healer. I specialize in teaching people how to heal shame and trauma and embody their authentic self so they can enjoy more meaningful connections in their lives. My areas of expertise are working with highly sensitive people, empaths, and gay men to develop a stronger sense of self-worth. So today we're talking about the practice of empathy and being an empath, and we are joined by Dr. Michael R. Smith. Welcome, Michael. Good to have you
It's so
here.
good to be here, Matt. Good to be here with all the listeners too. We're going to have a fun, exciting, and juicy conversation today.
I fully agree. I love talking about this sort of stuff, and it's nice to find a fellow empath that's doing very similar work, I must add. And it's going to be really cool to see what we create today. So I want to formally introduce you and just read your bio to the audience. So for nearly 20 years, Dr. Michael R. Smith's pioneering work to connect empaths and sensitives with their divine potential has reached millions. As a doctoral trained counselor, spiritual medium, and healing practitioner of Indigenous energy medicine, Michael's great joy is to serve as a spiritual guide for those at all levels of awakening. He has given presentations worldwide, been featured in documentary films, and on numerous mind-body healing summits, including the Shift Network. In addition to his annual Sedona Celebration spiritual retreat, he offers online intuition development classes, private mentoring, and the Empath Sanctuary community. He lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, where he enjoys hot yoga and talking to the mountains and trees. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I also can communicate with trees. It's amazing. And I live right by the Rocky Mountains. So
There's nothing better. They're the most peaceful creatures on the entire planet.
they were a large part of my embodiment. I've struggled most of my life with being very cerebral and can't get out of my head. And just holding a tree and connecting with a tree just grounds me right into my body. It's the most profound experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we need that as empaths. That's what, because we have a tendency to overthink, and we'll talk about this more about later on. But trees are one of the best ways to quiet the mind.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to be talking a bit about both. We're going to be talking a bit about empathy, people that have high empathy, and then bleeding that into being an empath, which they are different things, but there is similarities there that we'll be able to differentiate. So some of the things we're going to be talking about is what is empathy? What does it mean to be an empath? Why is empathy important in our world? Challenges of having high empathy or being an empath, and the benefits of high empathy and being an empath. And we're going to just briefly touch on the science of empathy and what that looks like as far as like the neuroscience. And then if we have time, we got a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to talk about what is it like being an empath in relationships, and what is it like to have sex as an empath. Those two honestly could be a whole episode of their own. So we'll see how far we get. But yeah, so why don't we start with empathy? And I figured what we could do is maybe just each kind of define what it means to us and go from there. So what would you say empathy means to you?
Empathy is the ability to literally perceive and know and sense what another person is going through. It's different than sympathy. Sympathy is a mental process. Oh, I feel sorry for this person. They're in pain. I really don't know what they're going through, but I know they're in pain. Versus empathy, I feel it in my heart. I sense it in my mind. I can feel and perceive and sense and know what another person is going through directly. It's like a direct cording, a direct link to perceive someone else. That's how I see it. What about you?
Totally. I want to just ask you something. Do you think all people have empathy?
Well, no. Because if you look at someone who's like a psychopath, or a sociopath, or even a narcissist to some degree, a psychopath would have none. Narcissist might have a little bit, but definitely not as much. As there are certain individuals who are designed by the universe to have more empathy, and certain individuals, in my belief, that are designed by the universe to have less empathy. And what we're talking about today is gay men and our inherent sensitivity and our inherent empathy.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I have to, there we go. Yes, I fully agree. And I think that people that have high empathy are people that are here to improve the consciousness of humanity, right? And accelerate the consciousness of humanity. So do you think empathy is something that can be developed?
Um, well, yes, it can. And I think that we are given a baseline for our where we're at, low, medium, high,
Mm-hmm.
just by the way that we're designed, just by the way that we've been configured by the universe. And yes, I think we can teach it. Uh, but I have a feeling that those that are listening today are not going to be the ones that need to um, be taught empathy.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
need to learn how to uh, cope and manage successfully our empathy so that it doesn't drain or overwhelm us.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I kind of look at it like a nature nurture thing. I think we have obviously the neuroscience that shows that like empathy is an innate quality in most human beings. And then I think there's people that experience empathy, a lot of empathy in their upbringing, in their childhood, and they exhibit high qualities of empathy with others. And then if you look at, you look at people that have, high traits of narcissism, they likely experience a lack of empathy displayed towards them in childhood, right? So I do think there's both components here. So I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think it can be developed,
Yep.
but I do think there's obviously a baseline that we have. So I wanted to share my definition. It's pretty much exactly yours. I just worded it a little differently, but the ability to understand and share in the emotional experience of another.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. And I
Share it.
think it's like understanding, because we all share this kind of, chord of being a human, right? And we all know what it's like to have human experience and suffering and these sorts of things. Um, and then to be able to share in that with another, right? So I do see myself, as I'm getting older, I have more empathy because I have more lived experience to draw on to feel into the empathy of others. So so even for myself, like I've been highly empathic since I was a kid, and like I would cry when I would see someone suffering. Like that's, and as I'm getting older, it's getting even more intense, right? Which is like I never even thought that was possible. But I also have the tools now to deal with my high empathy, right? So it doesn't feel as intense maybe as when I was a kid. So yeah, okay. Anything else you want to say on that topic? What is empathy?
um, I, no, I mean, I would like to share a little bit more about what an empath is.
That's where we're heading. Yeah. Okay. So take us away.
Okay. So, those of us that have been built, designed by the universe to be here on Earth, uh, have to be empaths, have a lot of traits in common. Number one, we can sense and know what another person is going through.
Mhm.
Um, for those listeners who might be wondering, am I an empath? If you've ever walked into a room and you can sense just the general, like what's going on in the room, like, okay, it's a little tense in here right now. I don't know. You're likely an empath. We
Yeah.
can sense just through how we're built and the mirror neurons that we've been giving, the diffuse and porous aura that we've been given. We can sense what's going on with other people and even with groups too.
Yeah.
um, if you've ever looked into someone's eyes who is struggling and you have maybe felt like an energy drain going on, you're likely an empath.
Yeah.
That can be a difficult one. It's easy when you're dealing with someone who's very high vibrational and happy and joyous in that moment. We love that kind of stuff because we can look into someone's eyes, no problem.
Mhm.
But if you've ever had the experience of someone coming up to you and like just and saying something along these lines, I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, but I just feel like, and then they proceed to sometimes even dump their deepest, darkest secrets on you. You're an empath because people feel safe around empaths.
Yes.
And because we're designed to understand the other, and the other, they can sense that on a very on a level that is outside of conscious awareness.
Yeah.
um, I think, and then also because of the fact that we're so in tune, we're so sensitive, we have what is called sensitive sensitivity process. Wait, I'm totally screwing this up. Sensory processing sensitivity. That can be a tongue twister.
Yeah.
That is present in all empaths. And basically what that means is our nervous system is on alert and very open and receptive to all vibrations, to sadness, to anger, to happiness and joy. And that fact that we are designed, our nervous systems are designed to pull in
Yeah.
energy and feel it can be incredibly overwhelming. And
Yeah.
that leads to a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, yeah, I fully, everything that you said, full resonance there. I think, it's challenging being a young empath and not knowing that you're an empath, because you have that, like, even in my family system, like my parents they struggled a lot, and my mother would almost probably subconsciously draw on my energetic field, right? Because I believe that all empaths come into this life with big energy centers,
Yes.
and we use those energy centers to transmute energy. And I think that's the thing I'll add on to your definition, because everything that you said I'm in full resonance with. um, Empaths have the ability to transmute. So the difference between high empathy would be somebody can understand and share in the experience, which then the empath takes it a couple steps further, which I look at as transmutation and healing. So we take energy and we recycle it, and more so in the emotional domain. So empaths are really good at understanding emotion and transmuting emotion. So, and if we look at the thing that's the density of why human consciousness isn't evolving, it's unprocessed emotional experiences that are maybe trapped in the body, in the psyche. So I think we're extremely good at helping people release and process and transmute that density so their consciousness can elevate. So I think we serve such a powerful purpose, like, on this planet, like, but the key, and I love how in your bio it was about empowerment. You want to empower empaths to be able to do their job, right? Because a lot of us come into this life with a lot of trauma, because we are very sensitive and we're very porous, and it's extremely important. And this is my mission too. We share a soul path, which is so beautiful, um, to help empaths and sensitive people really come into their power so they can do what they're meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm honored, and I feel really excited to be talking about this with you today, because I want to inspire other empaths to rise, right?
I love that. And I love what you just said, because, the fact that we do elevate consciousness in other people, we do bring them up. Our job is to release, as you say, transmute, change it from a lower state to a higher consciousness state. That's not an easy gig.
Yes.
That is a very challenging role that, for those of us that are empaths and sensitives, have been put on this planet to do at a
Yeah.
very auspicious time in human history. So I love what you said,
Yeah.
you know, about the importance of transmutation. And then the question then becomes, what do we need to do in order to release our challenges and let go of the things that hold us back, to doing that in a way that keeps us healthy and sane, so we don't feel like we're constantly overstimulated or overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we can like share a little bit of our own personal experience as a way to kind of like an anecdote for people to understand. Are you open to sharing? So, how old were you when you realized you were an empath?
Well, um, it wasn't
Like, and
until,
understood the terminology, I should say. Like,
yeah,
I think we
I was
know.
about 30
Okay,
when
yeah,
I first heard and understood the terminology. And yet, like you were talking about, we don't get a manual as a kid. So just like you, I was very sensitive when I was a young child. And one of my early memories is being like 7 years old and seeing, to this day, I still remember this man's was the saddest human being I have ever felt in my life. And
Mhm.
I had to go in the other room. It was a big celebration and a big anniversary party for my grandparents. And my parents were wondering, why the hell is Michael in
No.
the room crying while I was processing energy for this man who I still to this day can feel how sad he was. But that's what
Wow.
we're here to do. And now we're doing it in a way that we don't have to be overwhelmed in, like in the moment that I was when, when we were 7, when I was 7. We're doing it
Yeah,
in a healthier way.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that there's always some memories that stand out, yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, I remember when I would walk by like homeless people, when I was a kid. I would just have intense urges to cry. And, and I believe what that is we're literally taking on the energy that we're feeling in them, and we're helping that person cope with it. And I think it's really cool, but I'm not going to say all people on this planet have the ability to do that, because I think it is a select few that would be empathic, but I do think everybody has the ability to heal hearts and to come into connection with each other. So that's when we're talking about like high empathy, right? People who are exhibiting and displaying high empathy. It's everybody has the ability to be able to connect with another human being and make them feel seen and heard and understood. And that is a powerful gift, right, that all human beings have for the most part, with obviously the asterisks of the narcissistic people, or people with psychopathy. But so yeah, it is powerful. But I think about the pressure that I felt when I was young, to hide this part of me. And there was a lot of shame actually around this, because I bought in hardcore to the owner's manual that was given to me by people that didn't know I was highly sensitive or empathic. And then I thought there was something wrong with me. So I went through this massive period in my life, like up, because I realized I was an empath around 22, 23. So all the way up to that point, I always thought there was something wrong with me, and I was trying to fix myself. I would have tics when I was a kid. I thought I had like Tourette's syndrome. I would be in constant states of fear as a child, and like I would get woken up from dreams and things like that. And I would try and communicate to my parents what was going on for me, and they had no clue how to support me through that. So I just remember a lot of my experience as a kid being a lot of fear, and then I learned to dissociate as a kid, and that was really harmful because that took me out of my gift. So a lot of my adult life, I would say from probably 26 onward, has been me trying to reconnect to my gift, because I was so dissociated. I wasn't feeling my emotions because everything was so intense for me. And I think just learning about the trait of being an empath around 20, 22, 23, but then I learned about being highly sensitive and sensory processing sensitivity when I was 34, so only 3 years ago. And that was a game changer for me, because I didn't realize that because I kind of see them as a little bit different. I see empathy, being an empath, as different as being highly sensitive, because I do know some empaths that don't have any of the processing stuff, the sensory stuff. And it almost kind of feels like a bit of a double whammy when you have both, because it's like, shit, like my nervous system is constantly dysregulated by loud sounds, bright lights, these sorts of things. But there's also the emotional reactivity of being highly sensitive too. And that was probably the hardest thing to come back into, because I wasn't feeling my emotions for years, a decade probably. So I had a lot of backlog of stuff I had to deal with before I could clear out and start to be able to do this empathic healing work from a place of empowerment, not like, fuck, it's draining me every time that I'm empathing for somebody, right?
What's the hallmark of when we feel shame? Okay, so we have two different things, dynamics going on here. We're an empath. We are incredibly sensitive. We're deeply in touch with the universe, the world, other people's feelings, and we feel like an alien on the planet. So we've got that going on. And then on top of that, we're gay men.
Yeah.
So we have the shame that comes from being, not only from being different from our extraordinary empathy and sensitivity, we have to deal with the shame of being different sexually as well. So we've got two big whammies that the universe have given us to figure out. And what is the easiest way to figure that out? To dissociate. And to go up and for me, it was like just leaving my body and just playing which is, empaths have this natural ability to just be very perceptive to like intuition and even psychic visions and communicating with other realms and consciousnesses. And that was me for many years, until I realized, like, that is fucking harming me. I can't do that. And I need to be grounded in the earth. Thus the reason why I love trees so much. For me, it's one of my favorite ways to just ground, is just to be with a tree. And we have to be able to stay grounded in order that, in my words, we don't become cuckoo.
Yeah.
That's like I've had too many experiences of becoming cuckoo.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel so seen right now. That's why I was giggling, because I'm like, it's so true. Like, I remember just even, whenever especially when I go into social situations, actually, that's why I'm pretty highly introverted, and I got to be really careful around social situations, because I fly upward, right? It's almost like a way of coping with the intensity of what's going on around me. That was more so my disempowered empath. I've come into a lot of really beautiful work in the last probably 2-3 years, where I've been learning how to command my energy system. And I've been learning how to ask like, through just simple commands. I never realized how powerful I am in being able to command my energy to do what I want it to do. And it's amazing. And people always say, it can't be that simple. And I'm like, it is. It really is that simple, but you have to keep practicing it. So I'll like say things like, I command my energy system to stand down now, right? When I go out in social situations, because before I'd be exactly like you said, porous, and I can't remember the other word you said of your auric field, porous and diffuse, right? And I would just be like open, and it's like I'll empath for anybody, even unconsciously. I don't even know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, no, I want to be grounded. I want to be embodied in my body, and I want to have fun too. Right.
Yes.
And normally what I'd do is I'd go to a party, and I would notice the one person that was socially anxious and not able to cope with their environment. And I'd walk up to them, and I'd start talking to them, and I'd make them feel, and I'm like, okay, so then my whole experience gets inundated by this person's experience. And I get it. Like, that's part of my compassion. I want it, but I'm like, I also want to enjoy the experience that I'm here to enjoy as well. So I've really learned how to set energetic boundaries and not take on other people's experiences too, because it's also a bit invasive, because that person did not consent for me to empath for them, right? Maybe their soul needed that social anxiety and that experience so they could evolve. But yet here I come in, swooping in with my codependency issues, like, oh, I'll empath for you because I can't
Yeah.
handle you feeling uncomfortable in my presence, right? So
Bingo.
I've learned how to pull that back in. And I always ask for consent now for empathing. I'll be like, I'm picking up on some stuff, do you need a hug? Do you need support for it? And if people say yes, then I'll be supportive of that. But I try my best not to empath without people's consent.
I love what you're saying,
Yeah.
because we're doing a master class here on what it takes in order to be an empath and be a healthy empath. And one of the biggest, in the empath world, we talk about energy protection. How do I protect my energy so
Yeah.
that I'm not fatigued or exhausted or overstimulated?
Yeah.
And the way that we do that is not through shielding and bubble meditations. There's a place for that. It's a temporarily effective way to, as you say, command energy. And long term, it's not a strategy, because who wants to be in a state of defensiveness? Oh my gosh, the world is going to harm me because I'm so sensitive and I'm going to pick up on everyone's lower vibratory crap. No.
Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
do is we need to set boundaries. As we're
Exactly.
talking about here, the importance of setting boundaries. That's how we protect our energy. We need to stand up for ourselves as sensitive individuals and say, no, I am not going to empath for you. I am not going to, with my consciousness, put the antenna of my consciousness on you unless you have permission. So thank you for sharing that, because it is an advanced empath skill to be able to say, no, I'm not going to be on right now. And by doing that, I know that's how I just stay out of it. That's how I protect my energy.
Yeah.
I used to do what you're doing. And I think a lot of empaths who are just now waking up to the fact that they're empaths or sensitive, you may be recognizing yourself. Oh, I do that. I have a tendency to invade, as you say, other people's, or be invasive with other people's boundaries. No, because that's spiritually and energetically illegal.
Yes, I agree. I so I'm going into my 16th year of doing counseling coaching, and the first 10 years were, well, I was very cerebral in my work. I wasn't very heart-centered because I had a lot of trauma I had to work through. But I also didn't understand energetic boundaries. I didn't understand how to properly do this. And I developed like compassion fatigue because I was too porous. And then just in the last probably 4 years, 5 years, I've learned really potent strategies to help me do this. So in between all of my client sessions, I will cleanse my field. I'll pull my energy back in, and I use commands. Everything is commands for me, and I've really learned how to manipulate my own energy. So I'll say, like, I command my energy back to my body now. And I will literally feel all the cords being released and my energy coming back into my field. And then once I'm embodied back into my own energetic field, I will say, I allow what is meant for me and I release the rest. And the reason why I say I allow what is meant for me is because I used to just be like very protective, and I'd be like, ugh, get all this energy away from me. But what I was doing is I was closing down my heart to all the love, all the appreciation, all the gratitude that people have for the work I'm doing. So now I let that in first. I let it fill my heart up. And then I release what doesn't serve me, like what's not meant for me. Did I pick up on some shame or some trauma that I don't need to carry in my field right now? I cleanse that out, and then I move into my next client session. And I do this with everything. I do this in dating. After I have a date or I have sex with somebody, I'm constantly doing this. That's the number one phrase that I repeat in my life. It's like
I love it.
probably 10 to 20 times a day I'm using that phrase. Yeah.
And that's amazing, because I have a version of that is the
I want to
exact
hear
same,
yours.
but with a
Yeah.
little bit different frame. What I do, and what I teach in my programs for empaths, is to just use the breath to do what you just said. So when I do this, I come into presence.
Yeah.
I bring myself back to my divinity. You didn't
Yeah.
necessarily use this word, but I think that's what you were kind of referring to. Is in that breath that I just took, I released my human ego. I released everything that doesn't serve me. That's the intention of when I do that conscious breath, and it's super easy. It only takes what, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, in your case, 5 seconds. I
Yeah.
command this, release anything that doesn't serve, and just let it go. And then we
Yeah.
do that throughout the day. This is again, it's an advanced empath skill that is super easy to work into
Yes.
our daily routine. It's all based on intention.
And that's the power. That's the power. And it's really interesting because when I was very cerebral, I wasn't embodied. And it's very hard because when you're embodied, we connect to a different energy. I think more of the feminine energy. And for me, that is the energy that's healing. It's the energy of intention. So that was really powerful for me to start to connect to the intention. And then once I set the intention, I feel a shift in my body. And then I know that, okay, this is working, right? I think it would work regardless, but I need to kind of have that feeling of, well, yes, my energy came back into my body. Here I am. I'm feeling embodied again. So I do think this work, when you say it's an advanced skill, I think it's advanced for me, at least, because you have to have embodiment or presence as a foundation for this work, right? So I'm always preaching in pretty much every single one of these episodes, get embodied, start a practice of presence where you can come back into your body. And especially if you're an empath or a sensitive listening to this, and your go-to is dissociation, right? That is a very, very stuck place to be, because you're playing out a cycle of disidentifying with yourself on an energetic level, right? And we need that identification with our energy in order to be able to work with it. I think it's key.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about, preaching embodiment, because it's what keeps us balanced. And so, uh, again, here's another example of just something that we can do real quick. All of the listeners, let's just go down, find a ball of light about 2 feet underneath your feet, and just say hello to that ball of light, and just keep your consciousness down there. And then say, thank you for grounding me.
Mm.
And then breathe up one intentional breath to pull up the nourishment, strength, stability, groundedness from the earth. And then exhale gratitude back into that spot. What are you feeling when you do that?
Just like, it's just a nice exchange. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long did, I mean, that took what, 20 seconds?
Yeah, exactly.
That's, over and over. I do some version of that meditation in all of my events over and over and over, because it's like building a muscle, with your arms or your legs. We just need to practice.
Yeah,
But it's really simple when it comes down to it. It's just all based on intention and visualization.
exactly. Yeah, it's powerful. Very powerful. I'm just kind of teaching in my work right now a lot about fear. Been meeting a lot of fear in my life recently, still moving through some trauma from like a higher level of consciousness. And it's powerful. I work with my chakras every morning, and that's a lot of the work I do to get myself safe in my body. Because from dissociating for so long, there's always going to be that kind of like feeling, like when intense emotions come in or whatever, it's like I still kind of at times feel like a child, right? Like in coping with emotion, like it floods in and it's like, oh, it hits you like a ton of bricks. So that fear is something I'm really learning how to be with and how to really affirm my body. And when I'm working with my chakras, I'm working with my nervous system, my physical body, but I think I'm working more with my etheric body or my energetic body, whatever you want to call it. And it's powerful. So I just use things like, I am safe too. I am safe to belong. I am safe to feel the sphere in my body right now. And it's really powerful. And again, it's all based on intention. It's based
Mm-hmm.
on the intention that when I speak to myself from empowered states, that I train my nervous system to also come along on the ride of empowerment, right? Yeah.
A dialogue both ways, from our higher intelligence and to speaking of affirmations that come from the higher intelligence. I am safe. I do the same thing when I go out in the world sometimes, not all the time, but if I'm feeling something percolating in me that feels unsafe,
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge that. And it's our job as sensitives and empaths to speak loving words from we have those two personalities. We have the human personality, the ego, and then we have the higher intelligence part of all of us. Every single human being has that. And so it's just a dialogue and a communication, letting the lower human egoic part of ourselves know that I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. And it really does work.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's another challenge, is the duality. How do you, that's a question I would love for you to answer, actually, because um, how do you deal with the duality of the ego and the soul?
How do I deal with it? I become
Mhm.
aware of it.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
ask the question, and I teach this in my classes, who's speaking right now?
Yeah.
Meaning, who am I aware of in this particular moment? Am I aware of my divinity
Yeah.
when my mind is quiet, or am I aware of my chattering, chit chatty, loving to talk ego?
Yeah.
And last night in yoga class, after the yoga class, I was again aware of both at the same time. I was super aware of my divinity and super aware of my human in that particular moment. And that's what we're all working towards. Honestly, I think every single human being is working towards this, not
I
just
agree.
empaths. It's just
Yeah.
that we're one step ahead of the rest of humanity. We're
Hmm.
kind of trailblazers, quite honestly. And
Yeah.
we're forging a path and showing people truly what energy is, what spirit is, and what higher intelligence is through becoming aware of
Yes.
who is speaking at any given moment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens in my business. I'm my dharma, my soul path is to teach through my own experience. That's just what I do. So I teach with vulnerability. So
Mhm.
I share the things I'm moving through, and I share in that moment. So this is what I'm navigating. And an interesting phenomenon in my business is people don't resonate with my work like strongly right away. It either triggers the shit out of them or they don't relate to it. They just can't grasp it. And then what happens is, like 6 months later, people start connecting with the work that I created 6 months ago, or even a year. And that's, I always say that I'm like, I feel like I'm like 6 months to a year ahead of the rest of humanity, because I'm literally forging the path for people to, enter the tunnel of transformation that I'm, either in or I've exited or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's cool that you say that as well, because I fully believe that. Yeah. And
Yes.
I also don't want to say people that are not high, empaths listening to this doesn't mean I'm not qualifying that as better or worse. I'm just saying this is my soul path. This is what I'm here for. Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And that's a great question. What is my soul path? What am I here for? That's the question that if you're listening to this episode, I invite you to ask yourself, what is my soul path? What am I here for? How can I embrace my gifts so that I can serve and fulfill and stay on my soul path successfully so that I'm not overwhelmed by it?
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. Amen to that. Okay, where do we want to go from here? Do we want to why is empathy important? I think we kind of touched on that.
No,
Is
we
there
covered
anything?
that.
Okay. Um I'm going to let this go where I'm feeling like intuitively. I want to talk about the relationship dynamic of this
Yeah, I
because
think it's important.
it's so important. And I think a lot of gay men, a very preoccupation with most gay men is dating, sex,
Hmm.
relationships. And I think it's important to talk, to this because a lot of the questions I get from gay men about being an empath, that when they're an empath,
Hmm.
is they struggle so much with their relationships. I struggle with my relationship. I'm the first to admit they're hard because
Yeah.
I can usually feel what the people I'm dating feel before they even feel it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
Hmm.
such a challenging thing to navigate. And yeah. So what are your thoughts about that? I'm curious. What's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about?
Well, I mean, it is challenging. I second what you say. I'm very aware, and even for me, uh, on a telepathic level, I'm clairaudient, meaning I can sense words, and a lot of empaths have other extrasensory gifts
Yeah.
in addition to just the five senses. We're very in tune with the energetic realm, the spiritual realm, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So that comes with its own set of challenges when we can literally feel and sense and know things ahead of time, and
Yeah.
not doubting ourselves is one of the biggest challenges, and affirming that, okay, I trust what I'm perceiving. I affirm that I'm perceiving this. And then the way, navigating in relationships is difficult because how and when is it our job? When is it our job? Is it our job to bring this type of thing to the surface for acknowledgement? How and when do we do that? That's an important issue. And then also, in relationships, not we need a lot of alone time. We need a lot of recharging. So
Yeah.
finding the balance between self and other, and then the
Mm-hmm.
us in there too, finding that balance. If our partner is not an empath, there is going to be problems and there's going to be challenges, because I'm just speaking for myself here. I got divorced 2 years ago because my partner was not an empath.
Mm.
And I was tired of trying to explain myself. And I need someone who is going to know and receive me for who I am. And when I needed and declared lovingly that I need alone time, my partner would not honor that.
Yeah.
He had relationship and attachment trauma where he was abandoned. So he would come to me at the very moment, I need you, I need you, I need you, at the very moment that I needed to be left alone. And so that dynamic happens very common.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so many things that you stimulated. I'm like, where do I go from this? But
Mm.
yeah, I relate. I've only dated one empath. I think I've dated 8 men long-term relationship, and one of them, and he was a somatic empath, and that's a big difference, right?
Yep.
So he was like a healer. He could like touch my body and figure out exactly what was going on with my body, which was dating a guy like that. Like, holy shit, it was amazing, and he's amazing. I love him. But I'm an intuitive and an emotional empath. Those are very different. So I'm like clairsentient. I feel things before they happen. I can feel into people's emotions. I can intuit, like that sort of thing. And so for me, it was really challenging, and it always has been challenging dating a non-empathic person, because I struggled with boundaries. And it's funny that you say that, because I am you and your husband, or your ex-husband, I should say, blended, because I had a lot of attachment trauma in my childhood, and I developed a disorganized attachment, but it show up highly anxious with avoidant men, and I attracted a lot of avoidant men, and so I need a ton of alone time as an empath, like tons. And I didn't know how to take that alone time because I was terrified of space in a relationship. So I would go into these relationships and I would just allow the person to smother me. I would smother them, and I didn't have that separation. So I would lose my sense of self extremely quick in relationships, and I would get terrified because it was a self-abandoning, and which I did in childhood as a way to cope. I abandoned myself to be there for my mother and her needs. So it's really powerful. Like, I think boundaries is the biggest thing in order to be successful in relationships, and learning how to come back home to your center and have a practice that allows you to do that. So that's the first thing. And then I think the other thing for me was I did authentic relating training, and now I teach it. And I think it's one of the most powerful tools to heal shame. And I carried a lot of shame into my relationships, from, being gay and being empathic and not, feeling comfortable with these things. And I realized, if you're going to be a highly empathic person dating somebody who's not, then you have to be good at authentic relating and communicating, and that was a downfall of most of my relationships, is I felt shame to communicate what was going on for me, because I'm like, these men are going to think I'm fucking wacko, right? Because they're like, how can you communicate with spirits and angels and this sort of thing? Like, you're out there, you know what I mean? And so those two things, boundaries and authentic relating, were just so key for me to find, the security to be able to be functional in relationships.
Yeah, you're speaking to yourself now in a way that you didn't before. And that's what sometimes it takes a little bit of, left, right, up, down, a little zigzaggy journey that we're all on here as humanity, as humans, and especially empath, gay men, right? I mean, it's a journey that is non-linear. And but it sounds like you have worked yourself into a place where it feels like you're very aware, and that's everything. I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm aware of my own human urges, needs, perceived needs that may not be actual needs, when I'm aware of all that stuff, my triggers, my wounds, then then it becomes relatively seamless, quite honestly. That's everything. And that's what I'm feeling from you right now, is just your own self-awareness. And so I think that's the journey that we're all on, including everyone who's listening right here, right? It's coming to know oneself.
You said it, that's so eloquently. I always say, like, transformation, 80% of transformation is awareness, and then the 20% is kind of taking action on the awareness that we receive. But yes, it's just simply, being with ourselves. And I think we have to be willing to turn toward ourselves. And a lot of us as human beings suck at that, because there's so many things to distract ourselves from ourselves in life. And we have to be willing to meet ourselves in all states, right? And
without alcohol or drugs or sex or overthinking or all of the addictions. When you talk about distractions, that's where those are the primary challenges of empaths. Is, are we going to work through our overstimulation or through awareness? Pure awareness. That's all we need. That's all the divine is asking from us. That's all higher intelligence is asking for us, not through human crutches like, getting high on cannabis or alcohol or whatever. Food, for me, it's food, or was.
Same.
I'm still working through my own food issues. Comfort food has always been, and still is to some degree, one of my the things that I'm setting the intention this year to be better at this year. And because I am a somatic, as you say, I call it physical empath, same thing. I have to be very, very, like, my body and takes a hit. Right, sometimes from the a huge amount of energy that we process as empaths, especially if we're physical empaths. And if you're curious, I have a little quiz on my website. You can go find out what type of empath you are.
Cool. I love that. I feel kind of blessed that I'm not, because I already have such a astute awareness of my body, and it almost to a fault. Like, I feel the littlest thing in my body. If I have a little ache, like, I feel it really intensely. And I feel like being a somatic empath would just annihilate me. I don't think I'd be able to do it. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
There was something I was going to say, but it escaped me. Okay, let's unpack the juicy one. What is it like to have sex as an empath?
Ding, 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 ding,
Ding, ding,
ding.
ding, ding.
Well, it can be freaking amazing
Yeah.
once we've worked through what we need to work through and let go and transmute
Mhm.
and release what we need to work through.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we yearn as empaths for the emotional connection. That's the commonality among all empaths is we're all
Mm.
emotionally attuned to another person. And so when it comes
Totally.
to sex, that's what we crave.
Hmm.
It's like, yes, we crave the actual sex act itself. We can get
Hmm.
horny, right?
Hmm.
And for me, just speaking for myself, I think a lot of the listeners will be able to relate to this. When I go on Grindr or a dating app and I get horny and I'm looking for, sex, I almost always, I mean, I can count on two hands or four hands the number of sex partners I've had in my life. 21. I counted it up the other day because it's
Wow.
so rare. A lot of gay men do that in 1 year,
Hmm.
some in 1 month. But I mean, that's my entire 51-year life is like, right? I mean, and I think that's very, very common for empaths. And the reason for that, for me, I need emotional connection. I
Yeah.
need dialogue. I need conversation. I need to know that this person is going to be safe emotionally and energetically. And if that's not there, it is not worth it for me
Yes.
to get courted because energy transfer with
Hmm.
empaths is very, very real.
Yeah, yeah, in such a big way. I define myself as a demisexual, and that's another term that I only learned 3 years ago, and I wish I would have known that when I was younger. But I think I was always a demisexual, but because I was so dissociated, I was hypersexual. I was, I wasn't honoring myself, and now, I've had a lot of spiritual awakening, and I now understand, and I'm embodied. I understand my energetic self and my emotional self, and that is very governed by what demisexuality, which is arousal by emotional connection. So it's like the average gay man is aroused by cocks and abs and these sorts of things, and obviously hearts and minds too. But I think for me, it's like my biggest sexual organ is my brain and my heart, right? It's like I find zero um joy in transactional sex. It doesn't do anything for me, so I don't do it, right? And you know, I think about all the times that I did do that and what my system was doing, and it's probably a good thing I wasn't connected to my system in a conscious way, because I was picking up and having sex with people that I would deem as not very healthy, and they're not doing their work, and they're not they bring a lot of trauma or shame or whatever into the sexual experience. And you're right, when you connect cord to somebody energetically, you're picking up on that energy. And if we want to take it even for people that don't necessarily believe in energy, if you're taking a guy's load, you're literally taking his DNA into your body, right? And it's doing its thing in your body. You now have a part of that person inside your
Yes.
body. That is a big fucking deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize that because they maybe don't look at it through the lens that we're looking at it right now. And again, I really don't want this to be like a shameful thing, or for people to be like, oh, but for me as an empath, this is a very real thing that I experience. And I don't want that, right? So I got to be very selective with who I let into my field and into my body.
Very selective, right? And
Yeah.
and and as much it's a question of what we want. And for me, I'm just speaking for myself. Yes, I want sex. I want the cock stimulation at times.
Yeah.
And but what I need is not to have sex. I need my own time with myself, and I need my own time until someone comes along who is a vibrational match. Um, then we don't have problems with absorbing or sponging the lower vibrational energy from another person.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I have a question for you, because this is something that I've been navigating. Because of being demisexual and highly empathic, I almost find I don't have much of a libido or a sex drive as a solo person, right? I'm not governed by that. So I don't really watch porn. I barely masturbate on my own. And but when I'm with somebody and I feel connected to them, I have a very high sex drive and a very strong libido when there's connection there. And I'm wondering if this is like, do you think that is like normal for that to be, or maybe this is possibly me having to come back into connection with my sexual self, because I did go through a period where I almost shut my sexual self down as I did a lot of my deep spiritual work, because I found that they weren't aligned. And I know sexual energy and spiritual energy are they're the same source, I think, but when I was fragmented is where I had some disturbances. So I had to literally shut down my sexual self so I could do a lot of this deep spiritual work. And now it's like I'm finding it hard for my sexual self to come back online and feel arousal and pleasure within my own experience. It's usually governed by the experience of somebody else coming into my field. I don't
I
know.
think what is your gut telling you in answer to your own question?
A little bit of both, right? So I feel like intuitively I feel there's an element of, yes, probably my sacral chakra is a bit dormant, and
Mhm.
that's coming back online now, and I've been doing a lot of deep work around that. But there's also this part of me that's like, yeah, like jerking off is okay, but yeah, it doesn't really do a lot for me. But and I'm also more of a pleaser sexually too, right? So I like to have somebody else to please and do those things with.
Mm.
So yeah, I think I'm really coming into learning more about my sexual self as a
Mhm.
fully embodied empath. Yeah.
And there you go. That's the answer. I'm learning about myself.
Mhm.
There is no cut or dry answer to this, because sexuality is so incredibly personal. It's
Yeah.
so incredibly complex. Where do our urges come from? Where does the energy or the desire come from?
Yeah.
For me, just talking about my own perspective on this for myself,
Yeah.
I know that because I'm energetically constructed with so much fire energy, that's the dominant energy in my astrological makeup and my elemental makeup. I just have a lot of fire and lesser water.
Yeah.
And so for me, individuals who are, I mean, we're getting a little esoteric here, but if you know your full astrological chart, not just your sun sign, but if
Yeah.
you're like an Aries or a Sagittarius or a Leo, which is part of my makeup,
Yeah.
then speaking for me, like for those that know astrology, I've got 6 planets in the house of Leo. That's a lot. 6 out of the 9, that's a lot. So I always have a lot of fire energy.
Yeah.
For me, that manifests in being horny all the time.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
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 So it's
We
different
we
for everybody.
Yeah, we should match on the pattern. So I have 5 signs in Gemini. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
extremely air,
Uh-huh.
and then I also have Aquarius and Libra in my signs as well. So I've got a ton of
Ton of
air
air.
dominance, barely any fire,
Uh-huh.
and some earth as well. So I'm like earth and air. But we should match on the pattern, because I'd love to be able to read
So
your
that would be
chart and we'll
cool.
see. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. That's a
absolutely.
side hobby of mine. I think maybe in my retirement I'll probably go into doing like study more astrology and then do
Mm.
readings for people, because I just love it so much.
You're a Gemini. It's
Yeah.
your job is to figure out with your mind and your intellect to
Yeah.
use that gift for the greater good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have 4 planets in Sagittarius, which is very similar to Gemini, which is where my intellectual stimulation comes from, right?
Yeah.
And air and fire are very similar.
Yeah.
Um,
We stoke each other.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested to see what this relationship gives birth to. So I feel
Mm,
like this is just the beginning of some cool things.
mhm.
So okay, I want to touch on the science really quickly. I didn't do a ton of research on this. This is just basically what I know. You've already talked a bit about it, the mirror neurons. These come from the premotor cortex. So basically, the mirror neurons are like when we see somebody crying, we have more, you know, more stimulation or more secretion of these motor neurons, and we can feel it, right? So there is science behind this that's backing up what high empathy looks like. And I don't know if there's a lot of science or like scientific literature that's done on being an empath. I think a lot of it is done on high empathy
Sensitivity.
and
Dr. Elaine
sensitivity.
Aron is a
Yeah.
pioneer of, I mean, she's the one who showed, back in the, what was it, the late 80s, that approximately 20% consistently across the board of the human and the animal population are
Yeah.
have SPS, sensory processing sensitivity, and are
Exactly.
could
Yeah.
therefore be considered highly sensitive. So there's
Yeah.
that in terms of the science. And then when we have the mirror neurons that light up when we see someone who's happy,
Yeah.
that part of the brain that contains our mirror neurons, basically those neurons fire
Yeah.
in whatever is in our environment, whatever we are exposed to,
Yeah.
those mirror neurons will match. So it's and consequently, if someone's sad, this is where the challenge comes in. If someone is sad or angry, then our mirror neurons also match that. So we have to be very hyper aware, awareness.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Um, there's kind of an interesting phenomenon that's happening right now since like Botox got introduced and lots of plastic surgery got introduced, is that it does impair
Mm-hmm.
people's ability, right? When you have your face is filled with Botox and you're not having any facial expressions,
Yeah.
because as human beings, we actually, our mirror neurons fire off by facial expressions and little
Yeah.
micro expressions on people's faces. And actually, this is interesting because in my counseling work, that's where I get a lot of my data. Is I notice little micro like twitches or little expressions on people's faces,
Yeah.
body language, and that's how I know what's going on, and then I can start to track and move their energy. So it's really really powerful. The mirror neuroning is really
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
And I was just going to say that the Botox industry is trying to make it seem like, oh, this is a depression cure now. This is their latest BS,
Blech,
that get
barf.
Botox and you won't feel sad. Well, you also won't feel happy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
where does that leave you?
Yeah.
Not human. No,
Yeah.
no, thank you.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And just for the listeners, I recorded a podcast episode with Dr. Chris Horan called um, the highly sensitive gay man. So that talks about everything you said about Dr. Elaine Aron. We unpacked all the science in there, and then the episode demisexuality would also be
Mhm.
beneficial for empaths, I think, to have that information. So. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about any challenges of being an empath or benefits of being an empath. Let's kind of just unpack. Yeah, maybe why don't we each share a couple that we notice in our own lives of things that might be. So we'll start with challenges. You want me to go first? Okay. Um, Well, I think for my biggest challenge of being an empath so far has been that the only way until I learned how to become an empowered empath, but the only way I learned how to cope was through isolation. So I became a lone wolf. I didn't want to be around people. And it was basically just trauma responding to my gift. And so that's been my greatest challenge. So I've been having to learn how to come back into connection because I'm an ambivert. I have extroversion and introversion, and I actually really enjoy people and I like being around people, but they drain me. People can drain me quite quickly. So I would say the challenge is having to learn how to um, have boundaries. And then obviously the greatest challenge of my life is healing codependency, which is basically a blanket term for saying I had to heal a lot of attachment trauma in my life. And that was one of my greatest challenges. That's the biggest transformation I've had to make yet in my life. And and then that was the work, the healing of the attachment trauma was the work that liberated me to being able to be around people more and in relationships. And I would say probably the other aspect of this would be my romantic relationships. Being highly empathic has been really hard because I feel dishonesty, and I've dated a lot of men who have struggled just like I have, and they were dishonest, they betrayed me, they cheated on me, they lied, and I could feel it all, right? And then I almost gaslit myself when I started to doubt, like, am I actually picking up on something real here? Or is this the activation of my attachment trauma? So it was very confusing, and I felt very confused most of my life because of this. So, those would probably be the biggest challenges for me.
Yeah. And for me, I can relate and resonating with pretty much everything you're saying. I'm not necessarily, I would not consider myself codependent. I never had that
Yeah.
um, experience in but definitely the isolation, um,
Yeah.
being the lone wolf for many, many years. And I think to add on top of what you said, in addition to the challenges with the romantic relationships, I think one of our core wounds is feeling shame for just being different.
Yeah.
And we need to come to terms with that. So I know that was early on,
Mhm.
especially when I was first going through my awakening in around 2003, 2005, um, really, really struggling over feeling different, not wanting to be on the planet. I was highly suicidal. And I'm like, I got to get
Mhm.
the hell off this planet. This is just not for me. And I think a lot of, I imagine many of the listeners can relate to that on some level because we are different. This is what I teach now, though. We're here to be different, to be the unique expressions of the divine that we are, and to use our voice to express our authenticity. And
Mhm.
where does our authenticity comes from? It comes from higher intelligence. It comes from that force that we are connected to that is constantly talking to us at any
Yeah.
given time. So the challenge is to recognize when we are in patterns of mental thought and egoic based thought that do not serve us. And then what's the beautiful thing when that happens, when we become aware of it?
Mhm.
We get to choose to listen and express, feel, sense, and know our higher self and our
Yes.
higher intelligence. And that is a game changer.
Yeah.
Once the higher self starts speaking to you and you become conscious of it, everyone who's listening, your entire existence will change and you will become, as you said, empowered, or my
Yeah.
term is actualized.
Yeah.
Right? Actual self-actualization is a large part of just receiving the divinity that's within.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Great
love what you
question.
said. Yeah, I think the difference between a disempowered empath and an empowered empath is trusting oneself. And I had to clear out a lot of shit to get to that point where I now prioritize every gut feeling. There's
Mhm.
not one gut feeling that passes through my nervous system that
Thank
I'm
you.
like, oh yeah, exactly. Thank you. Like, thank you
Yeah,
for this data because now I can act accordingly. Whereas before I would just bypass it and be like, oh no, like this is just my fear. This is just whatever. And
just
right, exactly.
minimizing
And
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, benefits of having high empathy or being an empath. Should I just
Ecstasy,
ecstasy? Yeah,
truly,
yeah.
because when we were empowered and when we're
Mhm.
actualized, when we're receiving higher intelligence, a higher self, then I mean, I spend most of my days just being super grateful and to be existing, where I
Yeah.
couldn't say that 20 years ago. I love life. I love what I do. I'm engaged in my passion, my dharma,
Mhm.
and it's amazing. So there's the ecstasy that comes, and if you're not feeling that yet, you
Mhm.
will, listeners. Just keep listening to the podcast and keep doing what you're doing. Commitment. If you're listening at this stage of the podcast, if you're still listening, you are committed,
Yeah.
and there's no doubt. And so just keep doing that, and you will, whether you feel it now or not is irrelevant, because you will feel it at some point. Is your higher self is going to land in your consciousness. And when you live life from that place, you can, I like the words magic and miracles, because
Yeah.
every day for me, and this is not hyperbole, I literally every day have multiple little mini miracles, and a lot of little mini magic, and sometimes over the top magic happens. So
Mhm.
that's that's my personal experience. I
Yeah.
love being an empath. I wouldn't want it any other way. I love
Yeah.
people. I love learning. I love knowing. And in the intellectual stimulation of like the conversation that we're having today is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
What about you?
Yeah. Um, geez, I would say there's so many. Um, Connection to nature is one of them, probably the biggest one for me because I can, like you said, you talk to trees. I feel I would say rock, tree, and river and
Mm,
mountain. Like those are kind of the domains that I work with, and it's amazing because I always say I empath for people and Mother Nature empaths for me, right? So when I get out into nature, I'm being empath. So that's where I go and recharge, and it's really powerful. I'm always in awe. Like nature is just there's no words to even describe it. I'm literally in awe when I'm in nature. And I think it's because I have heightened perception, I have heightened sensory stuff, and I can just feel, I can smell, I can sense the beings, the creatures, the life of nature around me. And so that's the beauty of sensitivity for me, is I'm highly perceptive and attuned to my environment. And so that would be one of them. Connection, like this. Do you know what I mean? When I can feel when I have strong resonance with somebody, and I can feel when I don't. So when I move towards resonance, it's one of the best feelings ever, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, actually, to go back to the challenges, one of my greatest challenges has been feeling misunderstood. Because if 20% of us are sensitive people on the planet, that means 80% aren't. So I'm not very understood by 80% of people, right? But when I'm connected with somebody like you, and you're my 20%, you're my soul fam, it's amazing. The connection is really beautiful. And then the other one would be probably anticipation, or the intuitive aspect of things, because I can anticipate things before they come. And I also have a very strong connection to the spirit world, right? So that would be another thing, is I'm constantly being guided, and I'm getting information, downloads about the direction that I should be going, because I think my soul path, like my ego is very resistant to my soul path. My ego hates it. It doesn't really want to be vulnerable, doesn't want to, collaborate, all these sorts of things. But my soul is like in charge of my soul path. And so I'm constantly getting information from spirit being like, okay, this is how you have to work with this and do this. And then that way I'm feeling guided, which is beautiful, because I almost feel like my spirit guides are like my parents. They have been guiding me throughout my life and telling me, how to navigate certain challenges. And I've always felt like I've always have had somebody there for me, even in my darkest hour. It's like I have a connection to spirit, and that's been my saving grace. So, yeah.
We can all take solace in that fact that we do have a force, parents. I love that metaphor. Parent.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of us might not like that metaphor who had bad parents. I had great parents. So
Yeah.
it works. It's a metaphor that works for me. And to know that somebody else is in charge that loves us.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful thing. I love how you said that. It touched me very deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Any closing comments from you? Anything you want to share before we wrap up?
If you're resonating, if you're listening and you're resonating to this conversation, take one action. Ask yourself, what is one small, non-overwhelming action that I can take today to declare to the universe that I am ready to embrace who I am?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's where it's at. That's how we manifest, is by taking these small little actions. So maybe go Google more about being an empath, or Google more about whatever resonates for you. If something that was said today sparks something in you, listen to that, honor it, and then follow up by taking a little action on that.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. And I'll actually build on what you just said. And, the word intention really stuck out to me from today. And I think, I always say, what benefit do you get out of not believing versus what benefit do you get out of believing, right? So, okay, not believing, well, the wool won't get pulled over my eyes. That's pretty much the only benefit. The benefit of believing is infinite possibility, right? So always move towards that. And my intentions always start with, I welcome in, right? I welcome in more love. I welcome in more peace. I welcome in more ease and grace as I navigate my healing journey, whatever that might be. So play with intentions, because they're very powerful. And that's like us saying, yes, the intention comes from me, I'm giving birth to it, but then I give it over to the universe to show me how to act accordingly to make it come into fruition. And that, I think, is like the most powerful thing that has changed my life dramatically, is just, believing in the power of intention and letting it transform my life in magical ways.
Magic.
Yeah.
Yes, it does become magical.
It is magic. Yeah. Okay, well, I just got to say that you are extremely easy to talk to. The flow in our conversation was really just, it felt like I was talking to a brother. So,
I agree.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for showing up and just
Thank
being
you
you.
for the invitation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel like we'll be creating more, so I look forward to that.
Me
And
too.
let's connect on the pattern. I really want to learn more about your chart, and
Okay.
we'll hop on a
Yes.
call and hang out and just shoot the shit. So it'd be
I'm
nice.
a man gen, by the way, in human design. I just learned that the other day. I'm like, I need to know this because so many of my friends are asking me.
Okay.
So, and aren't you a generator? I
Yeah,
have that in my notes
exactly.
from last time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, generators move in cycles, up, down, up, down. And that's, if you look at the way I work, my content, I like push out tons of content and then I go into dormancy.
Mm,
And then I, cultivate whatever, healing, transformation, ideas, inspiration. And then I come back out of dormancy and I push all my content out. And
mm.
yeah, so I'm very inconsistent in the way I work in the world, but that's how I have to be.
It
So
works.
I
That's
accept
how
it.
you're designed.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, please leave your questions in your comments. We would love to answer them and know kind of how you received this today. Would really appreciate that. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform and you enjoyed what you hear today, give us a 5-star rating and a review if possible, because we like to read them out in our trio meetings. So yeah, much love to everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you at the next episode.